"You refuse to help us." My mom texted, her words dripping with frustration. My sister Lisa had just asked me to fund her life again, this time to bail her out of yet another financial mess. I couldn't believe it. "You wish," I replied, my fingers trembling slightly as I hit send. For years I had been the one to pick up the pieces, always the responsible one, always the one expected to sacrifice. But not this time. Not anymore. I had had enough. I packed my bags, booked a flight, and left the country. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. Now they're facing eviction, and I can't say I feel a thing. This is my story, the story of how I stopped being the family's ATM and chose to live for myself. Growing up, I always knew my role in the family. I was the responsible one, the one who didn't complain, the one who could be relied upon, no matter the cost. Lisa, my younger sister, was the complete opposite. Always the golden child in our mom's eyes. She could do no wrong. I was the steady, predictable one, and Lisa, well, she was the one who lived her life in chaos, a whirlwind of impulsive decisions and constant crisis. It was never really a conscious decision for me to become the family's safety net. It just happened. My parents were always busy with their own problems, especially after Dad passed away when I was 18. He had been the rock of the family, the one who made sure we were all taken care of. When he died suddenly from a heart attack, I felt like I was thrown into a role I never signed up for. Mom, devastated and unable to handle the burden, turned to me for support, and that's when everything shifted. Instead of being allowed to grieve, I was expected to be strong for Lisa, to take care of things at home, to make sure we could still make ends meet. I worked part-time at a grocery store during high school, juggling schoolwork and helping Mom with the bills. Meanwhile, Lisa was given time to process her grief, to take time off school to go to therapy and receive endless support from Mom. I never got that. No one asked me if I was okay. I was just expected to handle it. When I got a scholarship to UCLA, I thought it was my chance to escape. But Mom couldn't handle it. "You can't leave us now. Not with everything going on," she said. Lisa threw a fit when I showed her the acceptance letter, accusing me of abandoning her. I felt guilty, but I had worked so hard to get that scholarship, and I couldn't stay forever, could I? I went to UCLA anyway, the first selfish thing I'd ever done. I had to. I was still expected to help out from a distance, sending money back home, taking care of bills when Mom couldn't manage them, and talking to Lisa every night to make sure she was okay. I was exhausted, but I kept giving, never expecting anything in return. No thanks, no recognition, just more demands. But things didn't change. They only got worse. Lisa dropped out of community college after a few semesters, and when I graduated and got my first job, she started calling again. "I need money for rent," or, "Oh, Mom's car broke down, can you help?" It was always something, always. And I always said yes, because that's what I was supposed to do, right? Help my family. Then came the moment I should have seen coming. The request that finally broke me. It was one late night, just after a long day at work. Lisa called again. "Can you help me pay for this? I really need it. I know you have the money." I couldn't do it anymore. My salary wasn't enough to cover my own expenses, let alone theirs. And yet, I was still expected to be the one who fixed everything. But when I said no, that was when things really began to change. In that moment, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. I had been giving up my own happiness, my own peace, all for a family that only saw me as a resource. The guilt started to lift, and with it came the clarity I desperately needed. I didn't have to be the one who always sacrificed. I didn't have to bear the weight of everyone else's mistakes. The next day, I took the first step toward freedom. I started looking for new opportunities, and that's when the job offer in Singapore came in. It was everything I had dreamed of: a fresh start, a chance to build something for myself, and a way out of the suffocating responsibility that had been thrust upon me. But I knew the moment I made the decision to go, there would be no turning back. The moment I accepted the job in Singapore, I knew my life was about to change. But what I didn't anticipate was the storm it would stir up back home. My decision to leave felt like a slap to my family's face. It wasn't just about moving to another country. It was about choosing myself over them for the first time. And they weren't going to let that go easily. When I called Mom to tell her the news, She didn't react like I thought she would. There was no excitement, no joy for my new opportunity. Instead, there was a long silence on the other end of the line, followed by a sharp, "You can't be serious." Her voice cracked, and I could almost hear her face contorting in disbelief. "I'm moving to Singapore, Mom. I've already signed the contract." "I'm going on Monday." "What do you mean, you're leaving?" she asked, her voice rising. "This is when we need you the most. You can't just walk away from your family like this." "David," I felt my chest tighten, my heart pounding as I sat there in my apartment, staring at the empty walls. My entire life had been centered around making sure they were okay. Mom, Lisa, everyone. I'd always been the one to keep everything together. But now, for the first time in my life, I had to make a decision that wasn't about them. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I've been doing it for years. Fixing everything for you, for Lisa, and it's never enough. I've worked myself to the bone, sacrificed everything, and I'm still just the one who has to help." "Well, not anymore. I'm done." "You're just being selfish, David. You know that?" she retorted, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're abandoning us when we need you the most. Kayla's having a hard time, and she needs you." Kayla, my sister, the one who never had to face consequences, who never had to take responsibility for anything in her life. My mind flashed to all the times I had bailed her out, paid her rent, covered her debts, listened to her cry over her bad decisions, only for her to turn around and make the same mistakes again. "You can't keep enabling her," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, though I could feel the anger building up inside. "She needs to figure things out on her own, just like I had to. I'm not going to keep being her safety net." "Kayla's your sister? How could you leave her like this?" "I'm not leaving her, Mom," I shot back, my voice firm. "I'm leaving you and her. I'm leaving all of this behind. I can't keep being the person who fixes things for everyone else while I rot inside. I've given up my life for you, for her, for all of you, and it's never enough." I let the words hang in the air, heavy and loaded. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I have to do this for me." There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment, I thought she might understand. But then, as expected, she dropped the bombshell that would cement my decision. "Your father would be so disappointed in you right now," she said, her voice colder now, laced with guilt. That was it, the final straw. How many times had I heard those words growing up? How many times had I been made to feel that my own needs didn't matter, that my happiness wasn't important as long as everyone else was okay? "Maybe he would," I replied, my voice steady now. "But maybe he would also be proud that I'm finally standing up for myself. He taught me to be strong, Mom, but he never taught me to sacrifice myself for others." The line went silent again, and I could feel the weight of her disappointment through the phone. But I didn't back down. I couldn't. "I'm sorry, but this is happening, and there's nothing you can say that will change my mind." I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. The moment I ended the call, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me, as if I had just shed a 1,000-pound weight from my shoulders. But at the same time, there was a deep sadness, a loss that I hadn't fully anticipated. I sat there in my apartment, staring at the phone in my hand. It was done. I had made the decision, and there was no going back. I had to leave, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And just like that, I was no longer the dependable son, the responsible brother. I was just David, the man who was finally free. But the price of that freedom, it was going to be more than I was ready to pay. I only hoped that, in time, they would understand. The flight to Singapore was a blur. I remember the sterile smell of the airport, the hum of the overhead lights, and the quiet hum of the engines as the plane took off. As we soared into the night sky, I felt like I was shedding a part of myself I had carried for far too long. My fingers gripped the armrest, my knuckles white from the tension of leaving everything behind, the family, the expectations, the endless cycle of giving. The freedom was exhilarating, yet terrifying at the same time. When I arrived in Singapore, everything felt overwhelming. The heat, the sheer size of the city, the unfamiliar faces, all of it was a world away from the suburban life I had known. But in a strange way, it felt like home. It felt like possibility. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't someone's savior. I wasn't a lifeline, a bank account, or a crutch. I was just a man starting over. I moved into corporate housing near the business district, a sleek, modern apartment with a view of Marina Bay. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I set my suitcase down on the floor and looked out over the skyline. The city was alive with lights, and for the first time, I felt like I was a part of something that wasn't tied to the demands of my past. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and adjustment. My colleagues were warm and welcoming, though I could sense their curiosity about my move. I kept the details of my personal life vague, not wanting to drag my family's drama into this new chapter. Still, I found myself wondering if they thought I was running away from something. And in a way, I was. But I wasn't running from my family. I was running toward a version of myself that I'd almost forgotten existed. At work, I was challenged in ways I hadn't been in years. My manager, Lydia, was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had moved to Singapore from Taiwan years ago. She had a way of seeing through people, and after a few one-on-one meetings, she had quickly pegged me as someone who worked too hard and gave too much of himself. "David, you're here to contribute, not to prove yourself," she told me one afternoon, her eyes locking with mine as I sat at my desk, reviewing a marketing report for our Southeast Asia division. "I've seen your resume, and I know you've been undervalued for a long time. But don't repeat that here. We hired you because we believe in your potential, not just your ability to overwork." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent so many years trying to prove my worth, trying to make up for the fact that I had never been enough in my family's eyes. I had always been the one who gave, whether it was money, time, or emotional labor, and yet it never felt like it was enough. But Lydia's words, those few simple sentences, made me realize how much of myself I had sacrificed over the years. I had built my identity around being the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who always said yes. But here, in this new chapter, I had a chance to redefine myself. Lydia's advice stuck with me. I started to pull back a little at work, to focus on contributing during business hours and leaving the office on time. I made a conscious effort to stop overextending myself, to stop volunteering for every task, to stop trying to prove I was worth the salary they were paying me. Slowly, I started to feel the pressure release from my shoulders. One evening, I found myself sitting at a hawker center, a popular outdoor food market, with a group of new friends from work. Renee, one of my colleagues, had invited me to join her and a few others for dinner. As we dug into the local delicacies, laughing and sharing stories, I realized something for the first time in years. I was surrounded by people who didn't need anything from me. They didn't know my history. They didn't expect anything from me. They just wanted to hang out, to enjoy life. And that was the first time I truly felt free. The weeks that followed were a blur of new experiences. I spent my weekends exploring the city, sampling food from all corners of the world, and hiking through lush gardens and nature reserves. I learned the rhythms of the city. The way people queued in an orderly fashion for the train. The way the streets were so clean you could eat off the sidewalk. The way everything seemed to function like a well-oiled machine. I felt like I was learning to live again, to find joy in the little things. But even as I embraced this new life, the messages from home didn't stop. Mom would call once a week, her voice laced with guilt. She would update me on Lisa's latest crisis, how she'd gotten herself into more debt, how she couldn't seem to keep a job, how everything was always falling apart. It was the same story over and over again. And every time I would listen, but I didn't jump in to fix it. I couldn't. I had to stop being the person who carried everyone else's burden. It wasn't easy. The guilt still lingered like a shadow, especially when I heard how much Lisa needed me. But for the first time in my life, I realized that helping them wasn't helping me. In fact, it was holding me back. Then came the call that tested my resolve. It was late one evening, about 3 months after I arrived in Singapore. Mom was frantic, her voice shaking with panic. "David, we're in trouble. Lisa's been kicked out of her apartment, and I don't know what to do. Can you come home? Please, we need you." I felt my heart drop in my chest. I wanted to help. I wanted to fly back, give them the money they needed, make everything okay. But I knew deep down that I couldn't. Not this time. "I can't, Mom." I said, my voice steady but resolute. I've already made my life here. I can't keep coming back every time there's a problem. You have to figure this out for yourselves. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear her choking back tears. David, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I interrupted, my voice shaking with emotion. I've been helping for so long, and it's never enough. You need to take responsibility for yourselves. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. But in that moment, I knew I was finally putting myself first. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who would drop everything to save them. And that in itself felt like the beginning of something new. It was strange, in the days and weeks following that conversation, to feel both lighter and heavier at the same time. On one hand, I was finally free from the constant barrage of demands, the suffocating feeling of being the only one who could fix everything. But on the other hand, there was still the nagging sense of guilt, like a voice in the back of my head that refused to let me forget what I had left behind. My new life in Singapore felt like a dream in many ways. I threw myself into my work, focusing on the projects that were being handed to me. Lydia, my manager, had been right. I was capable, I was skilled, and I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. For the first time in years, I felt like my hard work was being appreciated, not just because I was being responsible, but because I was genuinely good at what I did. Still, the guilt didn't fade as quickly as I had hoped. Every time I saw a message from Mom or Lisa, every time the phone rang and I saw their names pop up, my stomach churned. I had spent so much of my life trying to make them happy, trying to fix their problems, that the idea of walking away entirely felt wrong, even if I knew it was the right choice. The hardest part was Lisa. I had been there for her through every failed relationship, every financial mess she had gotten herself into, every bad decision she had made. She was my sister, and despite everything, I loved her. But she had never learned to stand on her own 2 feet. She had always known that I would swoop in and save her, and I realized now that I had enabled her to keep making the same mistakes. One night, a few months after I'd left, I received a text from Lisa. It was short, but it hit me harder than I expected. I don't know how to do this without you. I need you, David. I can't fix my life without your help. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. My heart ached. Every fiber of my being wanted to call her, to send her the money she needed, to fix everything. But I couldn't. I had already given so much, and I knew that if I didn't stop now, I would fall back into the same cycle. I would go back to being the person they turned to for everything, the person who never had a chance to live for himself. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, and finally, I typed out a response. I can't do this anymore, Lisa. You need to figure this out on your own. I know it's hard, but you have to start taking responsibility for your life. I can't keep bailing you out. I hit send, then immediately regretted it. The guilt came rushing in like a flood, and I felt the familiar pang in my chest. But as I set the phone down, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. By not helping, by refusing to step in every time they needed me, I was giving them the chance to grow. I was giving them the chance to become the people they should have been all along. People who could stand on their own 2 feet. The next few days were a blur of work and distractions. I threw myself into my projects, keeping busy and trying to push the guilt out of my mind. But it wasn't long before the inevitable happened. Mom called. David, you have to come home. Lisa's been kicked out again, and I don't know what to do. Mom's voice cracked over the phone. Please, we need you. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling a wave of anger and frustration rise within me. I had known this was coming, but hearing the desperation in her voice, made it so much harder. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that this was the moment I had been preparing for. This was the moment I had to stand firm. Mom, I'm not coming back. I've made my life here, and I'm not going to keep sacrificing mine for you or Lisa. You both have to start taking responsibility for yourselves. There was a long silence on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, the sound of her trying to find the right words. You're being selfish, David. We're your family. We need you. No, Mom? I said, my voice calm but firm. You need me to fix everything for you. But that's not my responsibility anymore. I'm sorry, but I can't be the one who carries all of this. You need to figure it out, just like I had to." I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding in my chest. The finality of it all hit me hard. But in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. I couldn't go back to being the person who was always there to fix everything. I couldn't keep living for everyone else. The next few weeks passed in a haze. I kept my distance, both physically and emotionally. I focused on my work and my new life in Singapore, finding comfort in the stability I was building. But even as I embraced this new version of myself, I couldn't help but wonder how long it would be before they came to terms with my decision. Would they ever understand? Then, a few months later, I got an unexpected message from Lisa. This time, it wasn't a text or a call for money. It was an email. "David, I know you've been angry with me. I know I've messed up a lot of things. But I've been working on myself. I've been going to therapy, I've started a job, and I'm getting my life together. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm really sorry for everything." I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart heavy. This was the first time in years that Lisa hadn't asked me for anything. She hadn't asked for money, for help, for anything. And for the first time, I felt like she was speaking to me as a sister, not as someone who was trying to manipulate me into fixing her life. I wiped my eyes, a mixture of relief and sadness flooding over me. Maybe, just maybe, this was the first step towards something better for her, for me, for all of us. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't keep sacrificing myself. The consequences of freedom had been painful, but they had also been necessary. And now, for the first time in a long time, I was finally living my own life. The months in Singapore felt like a lifetime. I had settled into a routine that was distinctly mine, one that didn't revolve around family crises or financial bailouts. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt like I was living for myself. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for years had finally lifted. I found myself enjoying the little things: morning jogs along the Marina Bay waterfront, evenings spent in hawker centers trying new dishes, weekends filled with impromptu trips to nearby islands. But the emotional residue from my past was always there, like a faint shadow lurking at the edges of my new life. I would be lying if I said it was easy to sever ties. The pull of family was powerful, and even though I had made the decision to leave, there were still moments when the guilt threatened to swallow me whole. I would think back to the endless phone calls from Mom, her voice laden with worry. I would remember the desperate pleas from Lisa, her words laced with both anger and sorrow. But the more I reflected, the more I realized that my decision wasn't just about me walking away. It was about giving them the chance to change, to take responsibility for their own lives. But despite my best efforts to stay focused on the present, I couldn't fully shut out the past. Every time I heard from home, a piece of me felt like I was being pulled back into that toxic dynamic, the one where I was expected to be the hero, the savior, the one who made everything okay. And the hardest part was knowing that, deep down, I wanted to help. I wanted to pick up the phone and fix things for them, just like I always had. But every time I did, I felt like I was sabotaging my own growth. One evening, about 6 months after I moved to Singapore, I received a call from Mom. It was later than usual, and I could tell from the tone of her voice that something was wrong. "David, I need you to listen," she said, her voice trembling. "Lisa's been arrested. She got caught up in some bad stuff. She's in a holding cell right now, and I don't know what to do." I froze. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had been prepared for anything. Another financial crisis, another failed relationship, another round of begging for help. But this felt different. I felt the familiar surge of panic rise in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't going to rush back home this time. I wasn't going to drop everything just to bail her out. "Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, "I can't help you. I can't keep coming back to fix her mistakes. You and Lisa have to deal with this on your own." There was a long pause on the other end. The silence felt suffocating, as if the weight of years of unmet expectations was hanging between us. "I know," she finally whispered. "I don't know what to say, David. I don't know how to do this without you. My stomach twisted. I wanted to reach out, to tell her it was okay, that I would come home and fix everything. I wanted to go back to being the person they could rely on. But then I remembered everything I had gone through, everything I had sacrificed. I couldn't undo that. Not for them. Not for me. Mom, I said, my voice firmer this time. You have to figure this out. I can't keep doing it for you. I'm not your solution anymore. There was another long silence, and for the first time, I felt the weight of the conversation settle over both of us. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, she said, her words breaking the silence. I didn't realize how much I was asking of you. I've been so focused on Lisa, on making sure she's okay, that I forgot about you. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, the guilt trying to creep back in, but I refused to let it. This was the moment. This was the moment where I finally stood firm, where I could see that my decision, painful as it was the right one for me. I know you're scared, Mom, I said softly, my heart aching for her. But you have to understand, I'm scared too. I've been living in fear of disappointing you for so long, and I've been giving everything I have to make sure you and Lisa are okay. But I can't keep doing that. I have to start living my life. I understand, she said, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to fix things, but I'll try to figure it out. I don't want to keep putting all of this on you. I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. I knew this was a turning point, not just for me, but for them too. It was time for my family to realize that I wasn't going to be their crutch anymore. I had done everything I could, and now it was time for them to carry their own weight. I have to go, Mom, I said, my voice gentle but resolute. But I'll be here. I'll always be here, but only if you respect my boundaries. I will, she whispered. I promise. I hung up the phone, the silence in my apartment feeling different this time. The weight of responsibility that had followed me for so long was no longer pressing down on me. I wasn't free yet, not entirely. I still had moments where the guilt crept in, where I wanted to fix things, where I wished I could make it all better. But I knew now, with every fiber of my being, that I couldn't save anyone who wasn't willing to save themselves. The next few days were filled with a strange mix of emotions, relief, guilt, sadness, but also a strange sense of calm. I felt the freedom in my chest, even though the road ahead wasn't clear. I knew I had made the right choice, but that didn't make it easier. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would Lisa learn to stand on her own? Would Mom finally let go of her need for me to fix everything? I didn't know, but I was ready to find out. For the first time, I was living for me, and that was enough. Next steps over the following months, I received sporadic updates from Mom and Lisa, but the nature of our conversations had shifted. Lisa had finally found a job and was getting her life together. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Mom, too, was adjusting, learning to let go of the expectations she had placed on me for so long. As for me, I was no longer just a man living in Singapore. I was a man who had taken control of his life, who had set boundaries and was finally living for himself. It wasn't always easy, but it was the life I had worked for, and it felt damn good. Months passed, and with each day I settled further into my new life. Singapore had become my sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without the constant weight of family expectations on my shoulders. Work was thriving, and my social life, though still new, was fulfilling. I had friends who didn't know about my past and didn't need anything from me, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't defined by what I could give, but by who I was. But as much as I tried to distance myself from my past, it still had a way of creeping back in. Every now and then, I would get a call or a text from Mom updating me on Lisa's progress, or more often than not, her latest setbacks. She was trying, I knew that. But it wasn't enough. She had to learn to be self-sufficient, and I couldn't be the one to carry her anymore. One evening, nearly a year after I'd left, I received an unexpected message. It was from Lisa, but this time, it was different. She hadn't asked for money. She hadn't asked for help. It was an email, long, heartfelt, and without any demands. My heart skipped a beat as I clicked open the message. David, I don't know how to start this. I know I've messed up so many times, and I've asked you for so much. But I wanted to write to you and say I'm sorry. I've been working really hard to get my life together, and I know it's not enough, but I've finally realized how much you've done for me. I want you to know that I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying. I'm going to therapy, I'm keeping my job, and I'm taking responsibility for my own life. You were right, I've been using you and I'm sorry for that. I hope one day you can forgive me. You don't have to reply. I just wanted to say this. I sat there staring at the screen, the words sinking into me like cold water. Lisa had finally admitted what I had been waiting for. She had realized what I had known for so long, that I couldn't keep enabling her. For the first time, she wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't trying to manipulate me into fixing her problems. She was taking responsibility. And it was enough. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of relief. Relief that maybe, just maybe, my decision had been worth it. Relief that she was finally on the path to healing, to growing up, to becoming the person I had always hoped she could be. I wanted to call her. I wanted to tell her that I was proud of her, that I had always believed she could do it. But I didn't. I knew that this was something she had to do on her own, just like I had to do it on my own. I had to learn to let go, to trust that she could find her own way without me being her crutch. But then, just when I thought everything was falling into place, I got another message. This time, it was from Mom. David, I know you've been upset with me, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I've realized that I've been asking too much of you, and I've been holding on to you in ways that were unfair. I've been so focused on Lisa that I never stopped to think about what you needed. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you can understand that I'm trying. I miss you, and I wish things were different, but I respect your decision. Please take care of yourself. You've always been there for me, and I want you to know that I see that now. It was another apology, another acknowledgement of what I had been trying to tell her for so long. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't about guilt, or manipulation, or trying to pull me back into the cycle of sacrifice. This time, it was genuine. She wasn't asking for anything in return. She was simply acknowledging the pain I had endured, and that was enough. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift from my chest. My family was finally starting to understand. They were learning, slowly but surely, to take responsibility for their own lives, just like I had to. They were growing just like I was, and for the first time, I realized that my decision to leave hadn't just been for me, it had been for them too. But even with all the progress, a part of me couldn't help but wonder, had I done the right thing? Had I done enough? As I sat there in my apartment, reading the messages from my family, I realized that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the most growth. I had given up everything to find myself, and now I was beginning to understand that I didn't need to carry the weight of my family's problems anymore. I could still love them, still be there for them, but on my terms. And that in itself was enough. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Things were still messy. But for the first time in years, I was at peace. I had finally learned to put myself first, and in doing so, I had given my family the opportunity to do the same. A few weeks passed since the emotional exchanges with Mom and Lisa. The quiet that followed was almost surreal. I had spent so many years caught up in the drama of my family's dysfunctions, and now for the first time, I could feel the peace settling in. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't perfect, but there was a shift, a significant one, that was hard to ignore. The guilt that had been my constant companion for so long had started to ebb away, slowly but surely. I no longer felt the urge to check my phone every time it buzzed. I stopped bracing myself for another crisis, another plea for help. For the first time in years, I wasn't anticipating disaster. I had a sense of calm, something I hadn't realized I'd been craving all this time. It wasn't that I didn't care about Mom or Lisa. On the contrary, I cared deeply. But I had to let them carry their own burdens. I had to trust that they were capable of dealing with their own lives, just like I had to learn to deal with mine. I knew this was a hard lesson for all of us, but it was the only way we could truly heal. We couldn't keep relying on each other to fix what was broken. We had to face the damage head-on, work through it, and rebuild. I started focusing more on myself, which felt like a foreign concept at first. For years, I had only defined myself through my ability to help, to give, to support. Now I had to figure out who I was without all those roles. Who was David? Beyond being the reliable son and the responsible brother, work continued to be a rewarding challenge. I was thriving in my new role, and I felt like I was growing in ways I hadn't anticipated. My manager, Lydia, continued to be an incredible mentor, pushing me to take on more responsibilities and trust in my abilities. I finally started to recognize my own worth beyond what I could provide for others. I was valuable because of what I brought to the table, not because I was the one who always picked up the pieces. In my personal life, I was also beginning to let go of old patterns. I had stopped feeling the need to constantly check in with everyone from home, stopped feeling guilty when I wasn't available to take a call or lend a hand. I had friends in Singapore now, true friends, people who wanted to spend time with me because of who I was, not what I could offer. I had started dating again, casually at first, but I was opening myself up to the possibility of real connections, not relationships based on obligation, but on mutual respect and shared experiences. Then came an unexpected twist in the form of an email from Lisa. It had been a while since we had communicated directly. Our last exchange had been her apology letter, and I hadn't responded immediately. But this time, the message was different. She wasn't asking for help, and she wasn't apologizing. Instead, she was sharing something that took me by surprise. David, I know we've been through a lot, and I haven't always been the sister you needed me to be. But I've been doing better. I've started saving money, paying off my debts, and I even got promoted at work. I know you're far away, and I know we've both had our issues, but I wanted you to know that I'm not the person I used to be. I hope one day we can talk again, and maybe rebuild what we lost. You don't have to respond right away, but I wanted to let you know that I'm working on myself, and I hope you're doing the same. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen. There was so much in those few sentences, so much progress, so much growth. I could feel the sincerity in her words, the way she wasn't asking for anything from me, but simply acknowledging her own transformation. And in that moment, I realized that I had done the right thing. By choosing to put myself first, by choosing to let go and walk away from the toxic patterns of our family dynamic, I had created space for them to change too. Lisa was finally standing on her own 2 feet, and Mom, for the first time in my memory, wasn't relying on me to solve her problems. They were growing just like I had. I felt a deep sense of pride, not just for myself, but for them as well. They were no longer my responsibility. I had taught them how to stand up and take charge of their own lives, even if it had been painful for all of us to get there. I didn't respond to Lisa's email immediately. I wasn't sure what to say yet, but I knew that when I did, it would be a message of encouragement, of acknowledgement. I was proud of her, proud that she was finally becoming the person I knew she could be. And for the first time, I was able to let go of the resentment that had built up over the years. But the most powerful change came from within me. I had spent so many years living for others, sacrificing my own happiness, my own growth, my own future. Now, I was living for myself. I was building a life that was truly mine, not shaped by anyone else's expectations, and that felt like a kind of freedom I had never known before. A few weeks later, I received a message from Mom. It wasn't a plea for help, nor was it an apology. It was simply an update on her life. I've been going to therapy, David. I'm learning how to cope without leaning on you so much. It's been hard, but I'm trying. I miss you, but I know this is what's best for both of us. I hope you're still doing okay. I read the message several times, letting the words sink in. I could hear the effort in her tone, the sincerity in her voice. She was trying. And that was enough. I took a deep breath and finally picked up my phone to respond. I'm proud of you, Mom. I'm doing okay. I'm glad to hear you're taking care of yourself. I miss you too. But I think we're both on the right path now. Keep going. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It wasn't a moment of forgiveness where everything was magically fixed. But it was progress. It was the start of a new way of relating to each other, built on boundaries and mutual respect rather than dependency and guilt. I leaned back in my chair, looking out over the city skyline. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. There was still work to do, on myself, on my family relationships, but I was no longer carrying the burden of responsibility that had weighed me down for so long. I was free, and for the first time, that freedom felt right. It was a hard-won victory, but it was mine, and it was enough. A year had passed since I made the decision to leave everything behind. Singapore had become my home in a way I hadn't expected. I'd forged new friendships, immersed myself in a career that challenged and fulfilled me, and finally, for the first time, started living on my own terms. The shadows of my past no longer haunted me as they once did. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. But life, as it always does, had a way of throwing unexpected challenges my way. As I settled further into my new reality, I realized that while I had made incredible strides in my personal life, there were still pieces of the puzzle left unfinished. There were still threads connecting me to my past, and they hadn't quite unraveled in the way I thought they had. The first real test came when I received a message from Mom. It was brief, but the timing couldn't have been worse. I had just finished a late night at work, and my mind was running on empty when my phone buzzed with her name flashing on the screen. My stomach clenched instinctively. Even though I'd built this distance, even though I had convinced myself that I was finally free, the pull of family, of my mother's voice, was still undeniable. David, I have something to tell you. I went to the doctor. They found something in my mammogram. The doctors are optimistic, but I wanted you to know. It's breast cancer stage 3. The message hit me like a freight train. I froze for a moment, staring at the screen, trying to comprehend the words. I had been prepared for calls about Lisa's latest misstep or another plea for financial help from Mom, but this was different. This was life and death. I could feel the old patterns of guilt creeping back in, threatening to overtake the peace I had worked so hard to build. The familiar weight of responsibility pressed against my chest. I wanted to run home, to fix everything, to be the savior. That's what I had always done, right? But then something inside me shifted. A quiet voice, one that had been growing stronger over the last year, reminded me of the decision I had made. I had chosen to step back, to let go, to live for myself. I had taken the hard path, the one that didn't involve giving up my life to fix everyone else's. And now, despite the crushing news, I had to remember why I'd made that decision in the first place. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. This wasn't the same as before. I wasn't going to rush back to be the fixer, the one who swoops in to save the day. I couldn't go back to that role. Not now. Not ever again. But that didn't mean I had to abandon my family. It didn't mean I had to shut myself off completely. It just meant that I had to do this on my terms. I called Mom later that evening. Her voice was strained, but she sounded relieved to hear from me. David, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I don't want to face this alone. I closed my eyes and exhaled. I knew this was what she had been afraid to admit. Afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of showing weakness. But that was what I had learned to do over the past year, to be honest, to face the hard truths, and to allow myself to feel without being overwhelmed by guilt or responsibility. You're not alone, Mom, I said softly. I'm not there, but I'm here. I'm always here. We're in this together. But you have to understand, I can't drop everything to come home. I need you to take care of yourself and make sure you're getting the right treatment. And I need you to lean on the people around you. Friends, family, whoever you trust. There was a long silence on the other end, and for a moment I wasn't sure if she would respond. But then she spoke, her voice trembling. I know, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I know I've asked a lot of you over the years, and I'm so sorry. I wish I had done things differently. I've been selfish, David. I've depended on you for so long, and I didn't realize how much it was hurting you. I felt my chest tighten as I heard the rawness in her voice. This wasn't just about cancer. This was about years of unspoken pain, years of neglect, and years of dependency. This was the moment where my mom was finally acknowledging the damage that had been done. I know you're scared, I said gently, my voice steady. And I'm here. But you have to take control of this. You've always been strong, Mom. You can do this. The conversation ended with an emotional but calm exchange. I told her I loved her, and she echoed the sentiment. Though the words didn't carry the same weight they once did, for the first time, I felt like we were both being honest with each other. There was no manipulation, no guilt trip, just two people, talking as adults, recognizing that the roles we had been playing for so long no longer worked. In the weeks that followed, Mom started her treatments. I kept in touch, checking in with her as often as I could. But the dynamic between us had shifted. She wasn't asking for help in the same way anymore. She wasn't looking to me to fix her life. She was dealing with her cancer in her own way, and I respected that. She had found a community of support, and for the first time, I could see her standing on her own 2 feet. Meanwhile, Lisa, too, was making progress. She had been working hard at her job, and her relationship with Mom had also begun to change. There were still bumps along the way, but I could see a shift in her attitude. She was no longer the girl who leaned on me for everything. She was growing up, making her own decisions, taking responsibility for her own actions. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and I couldn't have been prouder. A few months later, I made a trip back to the States, my first visit home in over a year. Mom had finished her treatments and was doing better. The scars from her battle with cancer were still fresh, but she had survived, and with that survival came a new sense of strength. For her and for our family. Lisa and I spent a few days together. We talked more than we ever had, and for the first time, I felt like I was talking to an adult, not the young girl who always needed rescuing. We laughed, we shared stories, and we made memories that didn't revolve around crisis or need. By the time I returned to Singapore, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The distance, both physical and emotional, had given me the space to heal, and it had given my family the space to heal too. We were no longer bound by unhealthy dependence or guilt. We were all learning, in our own ways, how to stand up for ourselves and take responsibility for our own lives. When I looked out over the Singapore skyline that evening, I realized that this was my life now. Not a perfect life, not an easy life, but a life that was mine, and that, after everything, was enough. I wasn't the savior anymore. I was simply David, a man who had found his own path, built his own future, and finally learned that the most important relationship I had was with myself. It had been a long road, but it had been worth every step, and for the first time, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be.